All right, we're live. Sorry
Ah,
about the
work.
delay. We had a minor technical issue there for 2 seconds, but we're here. Very excited to be running this Facebook Live session with our friends from Weedmaps. And here with me today is Leslie Nickus, Senior Content Manager at Weedmaps. Leslie, I'd love it if we can just start off if you can introduce yourself and Weedmaps for our viewers.
Yeah, so I'm Leslie. Thank you so much for having me. Weedmaps, as I'm sure lots of people know, but maybe some people don't, is a platform that connects consumers with dispensaries, deals, savings, and education about cannabis. We are a worldwide company, but today we're going to be talking about dispensaries in the US. So yeah, that's the gist. I oversee content production, and so a lot of the things that you see in market, my team creates. We get a we have an opportunity to talk to a lot of very qualified people in the industry. We have we learn so much every day, and it's really exciting. So I'm very glad to be sharing some of our knowledge today.
Yeah, exactly. And that's why we thought, you would be the perfect partner to go over this kind of really important part of the education puzzle when it comes to the cannabis space. So, as you all know, we're going to be talking about dispensaries, specifically for people who are kind of newer at the game here, who have maybe never been to a dispensary before, or they're just getting to know the kind of process of shopping for cannabis. Obviously, in the next few months, well, hopefully the next few months, it could be the next few years, there's going to be a bunch of new dispensaries popping up across the United States. So I think it's really a timely moment for us to be talking about this. So let's jump straight into it. We've got a bunch of topics that Leslie's going to walk us through. If anyone has any questions, you can just pop them in the comments and we'll answer them if they're relevant through the feed, or otherwise we'll take a few minutes to answer your questions at the end. There's also going to be some educational articles shared during the feed, so make sure you look in the comments. And for anyone who's tuning in after the fact, again, have a look at the articles down there. And if you have any comments, we'll be circling back on this video, so we will still be able to answer those after we're no longer live. So Leslie, let's jump straight into it. First thing we're going to talk about is what you need to bring with you to the dispensary.
Yes. So the most important thing, not arguably, definitely the most important thing, is to bring your photo ID. So if you are somebody from another country who is visiting the United States and going to a dispensary in an adult use state, remember to bring your passport. What they're really looking for is a government issued ID that has your photo and verifies your date of birth to make sure that you are able to purchase cannabis legally in the retailer that you're visiting. If you have a medical condition, a qualified medical condition that you have received a medical card for, you'll want to make sure that you take that as well, just to make, to a lot of retailers offer discounts and deals to medical patients. So you want to be sure you can prove that you qualify for those discounts and deals, and also some tax breaks. Another thing that's really important to make sure you bring with you to the dispensary is cash. There are some retailers who have figured out the card situation, but by and large, there is no real safe banking option for cannabis retailers at this time. So they deal almost exclusively in cash. And many of them do have ATMs in the lobby, so that if you have forgotten your cash, you can certainly have access to taking it out. But yeah, those are the main three things that you want to bring, and then a great attitude. Inquisitive attitude is a great thing to bring with you to the dispensary if you've never been there before.
Okay, definitely important points. You don't want to be stuck without one of those. So let's kind of actually take a step backwards and talk about, before you go to the dispensary, what do you need to do to kind of prep yourself to do your research before you step in the door?
So I've had a lot of I'll just give some background. My first experience in the dispensary, I did not prepare. I didn't look at much of anything other than Weedmaps to find the closest dispensary to me. So when I walked in there, I really had no idea what I was getting into or what that was going to be like. Now it's a lot easier to do your research ahead of time, and Weedmaps really does provide a platform to do that. You can use the app to find nearby dispensaries, look at their product menus to see what is available. We also have a feature that it's like a verified blue check, which basically indicates that if this product is on the menu, the brand has verified that the retailer carries it and it is a legitimate product. Another way that you can do your research is looking for products nearby. So if you have an idea of what it is you actually want before you go in, you can search by product and find retailers near you that carry that product. So whether you're looking just for a dispensary and trying to figure out, where the places by me, what do they offer, what type of products do they have in stock, you can go looking the retailer route. If you're like, hey, I know that I have a condition where tinctures work really well for me. You can also search by product type. Another factor that a lot of people think about when they're deciding whether to purchase cannabis is, frankly, the cost. So there are deals and savings available that you can find on Weedmaps. And then the final note with the Weedmaps searching is to create an account. There are a lot of benefits to creating accounts. And if you're using this tool to research retailers and products, you're able to do things that you are not able to do without an account, like favorite dispensaries. You can contribute reviews, order ahead in some regions. It kind of depends on where you are, but some retailers do offer order ahead for pickup or delivery. And it really just kind of takes the guesswork out of shopping because you're able to peruse all of the options before you even set foot in the dispensary, which is really, I think, it's a benefit right now, especially during social distancing and everything that we have going on. We're trying to minimize our contact with other people. So the more that you can research ahead of time, the better. You'll go in feeling more prepared. And particularly if you're feeling a little bit apprehensive about going for the first time, arming yourself with knowledge before you go is one of the best ways to kind of ease those nerves and walk in feeling like you know what questions you want to ask and you have an idea of what you want to walk out there having experienced.
Yeah, definitely. Leslie, I want to dig in a little bit into the product research specifically, because I think for a lot of people that are going into a dispensary for the first time, this is, the real question is, what should I buy? And no matter what, whether you're a recreational user or a medical user, there's going to be probably some trial and error. But do you have any advice for people in terms of looking at a chemical profile, kind of having something in the back of their mind to know what they're looking for when they go in?
Yes. So product collection, product selection. I have a collection. Product selection it can be very overwhelming for first time visitors. Yeah. You have flower, obviously, is like the original weed. Selecting from edibles and drinkables, concentrates, vape cartridges, topicals, tinctures. And for folks who are a little bit more familiar with more pharmaceutical applications, there's also lubricants, suppositories, and capsules. They all function differently and they all work with your body a little bit differently. So in terms of researching the product, it's really important to think about what it is that you want to get out of it and how you prefer to consume. So for example, somebody who maybe works from home and has children in the home or doesn't feel comfortable smoking, they may be interested in looking into edibles or tinctures. Every product type has a different bioavailability. I'm not a medical doctor, so I will not go into that, but you can learn about it on Weedmaps Learn. We do have that information available, which has been vetted by doctors. Really, the research is, I just keep coming back to it. Just continue reading, reading about all of the different product types. Edibles and drinkables currently seem to be the most popular, and that may very well be because, a lot of people are not very comfortable with smoking. Concentrates they're created by two different processes. So you have the process where it's non-solvent. So these are concentrates that basically take the oils from the flower and use a combination of heat and pressure to, expel the cannabinoids and the terpenes that are in the flower. And that's really the basis for how a lot of these other product types are created. There's also the solvent-based extraction, which uses ethanol or butane to kind of wash the cannabinoids and terpenes off of the plant. And then they use a process to basically evaporate all of the solvent out of it so that it's safe for consumption once it hits the market. And yeah, I feel like I just keep repeating myself at this point.
No, it's a complex selection, as you said. I want to speak also to what you mentioned about not being a doctor. Also, I am not a doctor, but anyone who's looking to kind of get an understanding of what strain or cultivar might be a good place for them to start. We've just started to publish on the Kenigma some information on which different combinations of chemical compounds in cannabis products can potentially help different symptoms and conditions. So there's some information there you can dig into as well. I think this kind of ties in. The next question I wanted to ask you is, who can you go to for help, either at the dispensary or kind of before or after that visit? Can you walk us through that?
Yes. So very, very first thing, if you have a medical condition or if you're considering using cannabis for a medical condition, it's really important that you talk to a doctor. And Weedmaps can connect you with doctors in your area that have knowledge about cannabis as medicine and can help you get your medical card if that is the direction that you need to go. I also would obviously caution that even if you're not using cannabis for a medical purpose, if you do have a medical condition, it's very important to keep your doctor informed of everything that you're doing and everything you're consuming, because there could be effects that you may not know about and they may not know to warn you about if you don't disclose your cannabis use. So that's very, very important. When you do get to the dispensary, the first person you're going to encounter is a security guard, which is, safety first. And again, like, this goes back to the fact that a lot of dispensaries deal in cash. They have very valuable product in these buildings, so the security is very tight. They also want to make sure that you are of age to enter the building. Obviously, in a regulated environment, these things are extremely important. If you happen to get to a dispensary that does not check your ID, I would highly recommend you find another one. Again, safety first. Once you get into the dispensary, you will probably meet somebody who is either a receptionist or clerk that will, again, check your ID. If you're a first-time patient there, they'll kind of give you the run-through about what is going on at that dispensary, different deals they might have available. And depending on how the physical structure of the building is, you may wait in a waiting room or be directed directly to the sales floor. And there's where you'll meet a bud tender. And the bud tender is really there to help guide you through the product selection. They're very, very knowledgeable. They, again, are not medical doctors. There are some bud tenders out there who do have some training and knowledge, not to say that they don't know about these things, but they are not physicians. And so they are able to give you a lot of information about how their clients or their consumers are using the different products. They're intimately knowledgeable about the brands as well. And that when it comes to product selection, the brand is important, because if you find a product that you really, really like, they will produce it time and time again. And if you want that type of stability and reliability, you want to go back to the very same place, the very same brand, the same product every single time. Otherwise, the trial and error comes around. When you find that thing you like, you like that and you want to find it. So they can give you lots of information about, even some of the philosophies behind the brands and why they create the products they create and, where they come from. They can also explain to you what's inside the product packaging. One big thing in the regulated industry that I'll speak for California specifically, we used to be able to go and actually see and not touch, but with chopsticks, inspect the individual flowers that we were purchasing. Now, under a regulated market, you actually can't open the packaging. So the retailers have found really creative ways to show people what's inside, and the bud tenders can give you a very good explanation of the different types of products that you might be interested in trying.
And can you smell them? I feel like this is kind of important when we're talking about flower.
Sometimes you can, and sometimes you can't. This also, again, comes back to the retailer. There's some really novel packaging that's available now, where they've got these clear containers and you can see the flower in them. There's a little magnifying glass up on the top, and you just kind of look, and you can open a little container and smell it. And this all, coming back to the compounds that are in the cannabis plant. And what you were mentioning about the different terpenes and cannabinoids, that smell is what's going to indicate to you how it might potentially make you feel, because you can get an idea of the different terpenes that are in the flower. Obviously, this can't be done with concentrates or edibles. You know, they're fully packaged, and you're not going to be able to smell them. I cannot think of a time that I have ever been able to, in a regulated market, open and smell an edible.
Yeah, yeah, that's legit.
I think we really don't want our edibles to be handled by people. You know, probably better
Yeah,
that they're
certainly
sealed.
not this year. All right, let's move on to talking about medical versus adult use cannabis.
So, as we had mentioned before, medical cannabis is really to help ease the symptoms of a particular qualifying condition. And the different qualifying conditions that are available vary from state to state. Each state has its own program, and each program has its own criteria. So, before you embark on a quest to get medical cannabis, you want to make sure that you research what the laws in your state are and whether or not you have a qualifying condition. So, the medical cannabis experience is largely different just because of the cost and the taxes and the purpose that you're going there. So if you do let your bud tender know that you are here for a specific medical need, while they won't be able to give you a doctor's consultation, they will be able to use their knowledge of what other people have come into the store looking for and what those people have purchased to kind of like allay the symptoms of a similar condition. So that's the medical part of it. Another thing to consider is the actual retail experience itself may be different in a medical market. So most of the time in the medical markets, you have your reception area where you show all of your ID and everything, and you have like a waiting room. You may have a consultation prior to going into the sales floor with a specialist. You also may not. So it really depends on whether the retailer offers that service. And then also in medical, usually you can't see the product from the waiting room. So everything is very closed off until you make your way back. This is also true for adult use retailers that had buildings when they were medical. So, you know, I'm just imagining myself. I bought this very expensive building. I have this beautiful, you know, secure location. I don't necessarily know that it's wise for me to knock out an entire wall to make, you know, an Apple store version of a retail experience once it goes adult use. So it is possible that in a rec market, you would end up encountering the same type of a retail setup where you're not able to see the product until you actually go back. In adult use markets, especially with some of these larger companies and these big retailers that are trying to mimic a more traditional commercial retail experience, you can see massive displays. You can see product not exactly from the street or anything, but you can see product when you walk into the store. It's usually a very open concept, open floor plan, and it mimics the commercial. Like it's like going to Best Buy or an Apple store. You're like, okay, there's a lot of things here, and maybe not a Best Buy, maybe a jewelry store is a little bit better of a comparison because you know things are behind glass and stuff. But yeah, so that's the key. You don't need a medical recommendation to purchase cannabis at an adult use retailer. You do need, again, your ID and to be 21 and over.
Okay, and so that's just going to really vary from state to state and region to region. All of
Yeah,
these
yeah.
differences, right?
Yes, and even what the types of products that you're able to get does vary from state to state. So some states allow edibles, some do not. Some allow concentrates, some do not. Again, I will just keep on mentioning it. You can find all of this information at Weed Maps. Yeah, it's such an interesting thing to think about the cannabis retail experience because there is not a one size fits all, and I feel like that's true for every element of cannabis. It's true for the plant, it's true for the patients, it's true for the retail experience. Everybody has a different expectation. And what's great about it is you actually can find that thing that you're looking for. It just might take a little while because the market is such that, you know, a lot of this information isn't widely available and there isn't, you know, there's not a standard I'm looking for edibles. I have to go to this retailer because they have the best. It is a lot of trial and error, but if you're willing to go through some of that work and you're willing to try some things that perhaps you have not tried before, the the chances that you'll find something you like are very high. That was not an intended pun, but it's
And
true
yet you did it.
nonetheless.
I've had someone from the comments say hi from Michigan, HIGA. Same pun. All right, let's go on to going over some do's and don'ts of dispensary shopping.
Yes. So definitely bring your necessary documents. I have certainly made the mistake of going in and forgetting my cash and then having no way to pay, which is so disappointing because you really just want to walk out of there with what you came for, and then just realize that you made a critical error like that is just, you don't need to do that to yourself. Keep the checklist. Definitely wear a mask. Currently, we are in this phase of social distancing. It's very, very important that you wear a mask. There may be people in the retailer who have medical conditions. A lot of people who have terminal illnesses and very serious medical conditions use cannabis to allay their symptoms. And you want to make sure that you are not putting those people in a compromising circumstance by not exercising safety. The next thing is to be honest with your bud tender about why you're there. Although we said before that they are not medical experts, largely not medical experts, they are very, very knowledgeable about the products, and they are very knowledgeable about the people who come in to purchase products for specific uses. And so they can certainly help you in that way, but you do need to tell them why you're there. If you're there for something for arthritis, for example, what they recommend to you is going to be very different than if you're like, hey, I'm having a party this weekend and I just want to have a good time. Also, maybe don't have a party because we're social distancing. But,
Could be a Zoom party.
A Zoom party. Yeah, there you go. Just, I'm keeping all this stash for myself because it's on Zoom and no one's smoking with me.
Sounds good.
Again, ask all the questions that you could possibly want to ask. The bud tenders are there to help you. They are obviously interested in making a sale, but they're more interested in making the right sale. Nobody wants to lead somebody astray and then create a situation where you walk away, you try the product and you hate it, and then you may never come back. So nobody's really incentivized in this particular instance or circumstance to try and push something that is not actually going to be beneficial or that you may not like. And then the final do is a very, very important one. Read the labels. Make sure you read the labels, understand what's in this product that you're purchasing before you hand over your money. In regulated markets, lab testing is required. And so there should be an available certificate of analysis that tells you what the test results came back showing. So they're testing for heavy metals, they're testing for pesticides, mold, and other things that can make you very sick. So it's really important that when you look at, when you pick up a product, that you ensure there has been lab testing done on it. If it's in the dispensary in a regulated market, that is required. So if it's not there, that's certainly something to second guess whether you should be moving forward with that purchase. It doesn't necessarily mean, it really depends on the market. It doesn't necessarily mean that there's, poison in there, but certainly if you're new to this space, you want to lean on those products that have been fully vetted and deemed to be safe. And most of that information will be available on the label. And if it's not directly on the label, there's usually a QR code on the packaging that will send you directly to that analysis. And also, if you have any questions or you can't seem to find it, you can ask your bud tender. They can point out where it is. Oh, okay. Don't.
Don't. Go for it.
Okay. I had mentioned this a little bit before. Don't walk in if you feel unsafe. There is absolutely nothing that requires you to walk into the building simply because you drove to the location and showed up. Every dispensary is going to have a different feel. They range from mom and pop shops that are, more kind of bodega style experiences for those of us who have been in bigger cities and learned, kind of like used to the smaller shops. And then there's obviously the multi-state operator, the large retailers who have, I don't know if you've been in Planet 13 in Las Vegas, but that place is humongous. And there are warehouse-sized dispensaries. So when you show up, if you look at the building, if you look at the experience ahead of you and you feel like you don't want to do it, then don't. You don't have to. Um, don't get too attached to labels like indica or sativa or even strain
Yeah.
names. This is very much an indication of what is in the product, but it's not actually going to tell you how it makes you feel. There is certainly a misunderstanding, I think, in the community at the moment that indica is going to make you really sleepy and into couch, and sativa is going to make you really energetic. And what we're finding, particularly as many of these cultivars are hybridized, that's not actually the indicator of how you're going to feel. There's a lot of other compounds in the plant that have an impact on the effects that it ultimately results in. And there's also a lot of changes within our own bodies and our own endocannabinoid systems that change how we may individually experience cannabis. So what you may have experienced, we could consume the same product and feel two very different things. So don't get too attached to the indica sativa labels. They are not going to tell you everything you need to know. They will give you a good indication of what type of plant was used to create the product or is the product in the case of flower. But again, it's not going to guarantee that if you get a sativa, you're going to have energy. That's a huge misconception that I think both of our organizations are trying to dispel all the time.
Definitely. Are you seeing less of this in California at the moment? Do you feel like the myth is starting to fade?
It's been challenging to challenge that myth, actually. I do find that more consumers are asking about terpene profiles, which is fantastic because,
Step in the right
again,
direction.
while you want to smell it, that'll certainly give you a better indicator of how you might feel. And I think that the consumers are certainly becoming more educated, but it's really hard to undo decades of collective knowledge that's been underground for such a long time. Until we have more availability of research and things like that, we're not going to be able to say definitively what exactly it is that makes you energetic or feel, relaxed. We just have like the best available information at the moment, which, obviously until we get access to more research, it is largely anecdotal and or preclinical.
Yeah,
Uh,
absolutely. So
I
I am going
know.
to actually just shoot over a question from one of our viewers here. Leslie, I think this is relevant here. Abby has asked, what are you looking for or smelling for, I suppose, when you smell it?
So there are so many different terpenes in cannabis, and the combinations are wide ranging. And I think the easiest way to kind of explain it is if you're familiar with essential oils, there are some general practices. You've got the citrus terpenes or the citrus smells, and they kind of are a little bit more energizing. You have lavender has a lot of linalool in it, and that is known to be a terpene that has relaxing properties. So when I'm smelling the weed, I'm really smelling for those things that are familiar to me. So I am a big fan of linalool. I really like the cultivars that have heavy amounts of that. It makes me feel very relaxed. I have learned that over years of experimentation that this is what I like. So what I'm really smelling for is like, yeah, this smells like that other weed that I liked. They have similar smells, so maybe they'll have similar feelings. Um, that may or may not be true. Sometimes I try it and it's very far off, but it gives you kind of an indication. The citrus terpenes, I think, are probably the most prevalent in terms of, or the most obvious in terms of their
Yeah.
presence. They make themselves very, very known. You may have to search a lot for some of those other non-pinene and non-limonene, like the bold terpenes are going to be there. So sometimes you have to like really get in there and search for some of those other ones. But that's really what I'm smelling for is this similar to something I've had before? And did I like that thing I had before?
So I guess that sort of approach is probably more appropriate for a more experienced user than a first time user.
Yeah, I think, a first time user, overwhelmingly, when I'm around people who are new to cannabis, they smell pine. Pine is
Yeah.
like the most common. They're like, smells like skunky pine. So,
Yeah.
so
Smells like
your
weed.
nose, it smells like weed. Yeah, your nose will eventually get a little bit more attuned into.
Yeah.
I don't know. It'll get better over time, the more and more you smell. So another way that that you can prepare actually as a first time user, and this is unconventional, but it seems to work for like some of my friends who are interested in learning more about terpenes and how to actually detect them in a product, is to go and
Mhm.
buy essential oils. Look up the essential oils that have the terpenes that you're interested in, smell the oil, and then smell the weed, and see if you can detect it in the weed. And obviously have a little container of coffee beans to kind of like cleanse your, what is that?
Yeah, obviously you need your coffee beans.
Obviously you need coffee beans. No, but if you're smelling a lot of essential oils, your sinus, your olfactory system can become overwhelmed, and the coffee beans just kind of neutralize that.
Nice, like cleansing the palate.
Yeah.
I
Fun
like it.
fact,
I'm
that's
gonna
why they
give it a
have them
go.
at the perfume counters at the what are those places called? The stores at the
Perfumeries?
mall.
Makes sense. Makes sense. All right, so we're gonna start our last section, which we're gonna go over questions to ask your bud tender, and anyone who's watching. If you have any questions that you would like Leslie or me to answer, now's the time to pop them into the chat. But in the meantime, Leslie, walk us through questions to ask your bud tender. I know we've already gone through a few, but hit us with them.
All right. Actually, if you don't mind, I would like to start with questions to ask yourself
Sure.
before you go to your bud tender. And this will also help kind of set the stage, as it were, for when you go to the bud tender, knowing what questions you should be asking. So, first, ask yourself, do you have a medical condition? And if you have a medical condition, have you spoken to your doctor? If the answer is no, it's probably best if you loop them in before you purchase and consume anything. Have you ever consumed cannabis? A lot of people who are new to the dispensary are not actually new to cannabis, but when they last
Right.
consumed, it was decades ago. And cannabis has changed pretty significantly. I think there's no shortage of headlines in the world about how cannabis has gotten more potent over time. So consider, when was the last time you smoked or consumed, and what was the weed like at that time? You'll want to keep this in mind as you're asking your bud tender questions about potency in particular. Are you okay with smoking, or would you prefer, say, a cookie or a tincture? Are you more comfortable with some of the more pharmaceutical applications, and are they actually suitable for your personal preference? Those are something that you want to ask yourself before you walk in. And then the final question, I think, is one of the most important ones for many, many people, particularly those medical patients who are unlimited incomes or have fixed incomes. How much do you need, and how much do you want to spend? And that knowing that final thing is going to help your bud tender find something in the range of products that is actually affordable for you. And, so that you don't get surprised and end up paying a lot more for something that you actually can't sustain in terms of, going back and purchasing again, should it actually work for you. Um, the questions to ask your bud tender, you really want to kind of establish some sort of a relationship right at the get-go. So knowing what their consumption preferences are will help you to compare their personal preferences with yours, and kind of get an idea for when they say, I like this, is that something that you would like? Are your consumption preferences similar, or are they not? It's okay if they're not. But again, this comes down to, letting your bud tender know all of the things that they need to know in order to best help you. Ask them what products they've tried. Bud tenders have exposure to a lot of different types of products that, especially a first time consumer probably has never even encountered. They may have tried it, and they can give you their honest opinion about what it is they experienced and whether they liked it. Again, this doesn't mean that will be your experience, because our bodies are different, but it definitely gives you an indication of, somebody felt this way, perhaps I also will. Do they have many clients who are looking for the same thing that you are looking for? So if you find a shop and they cater to the type of customer that you are, you're more likely to find products that actually work for you. And then you can also get involved in, some retailers have loyalty programs, and you can go on preference lists and get recommendations and things like that. If you interact with some of their marketing tools, frankly, that's what they are. And then is the product they're recommending lab tested? You want to make sure that you follow up on that safety time and time again. One thing that I didn't mention in the don'ts is don't feel like you have to spend more than you're able, and don't feel like you have to make a purchase. If you go in and you ask all of these questions and you're prepared and there just isn't something that suits you, it is completely acceptable to say, thank you very much for your time. I learned a lot. I don't think this is for me right now. And then you can leave. I think a lot of times people, they go into the dispensary and they're there for the first time. They're nervous. They feel compelled to make a purchase because they're there. And that definitely is not the expectation. It is not a requirement. Cannabis is a substance that changes your body. And it's really important that if you choose to partake, that you feel comfortable doing so. And it's not just something that you're going to spend $100 on and ends up sitting on your counter because you made a purchase out of pressure. That's certainly not what anybody wants. We would like you to consume it and see how it makes you feel.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Leslie, I've got a few questions from viewers, which I'll read to you in a second, but I wanted to just dig in for a minute. You mentioned before that, bartenders obviously are not medical professionals, but they are knowledgeable. Can you talk a little bit to the training that bartenders have? I know it varies, but
it does.
So, yeah.
It varies widely. I am aware of some dispensaries in Southern California that require their bud tenders to go through some formal training, and there's a lot out there. There's a lot of educational tools available to bud tenders and businesses that will help ensure that they understand how to talk about the plant in the most, the ways that modern research supports. And but it really depends on the location, whether they require that or not. And usually if they require their bud tenders to go through some sort of training or evaluation or educational course, that is listed somewhere on their website, on their listing description. When retailers make the investment in education on behalf of their bud tenders, they want to make sure that you know about that. So it wouldn't be some kind of hidden thing. You also can ask, what kind of training have you had? It's not required. And so that's, I think, one thing that's really important. And that doesn't vary from state to state. I don't believe it's required anywhere. Just like it's not required for me to understand how to build an app in order to, talk about the values of Weedmaps, for example. They also are knowledgeable, but not necessarily medical professionable. A lot of the doctors who specialize in cannabis therapies, they have those answers, and they are available and also discoverable on Weedmaps.
I like it. All right, let's jump into some questions before we finish up. So first of all, Terry has asked, are terpene profiles required on the product documentation at legal dispensaries?
They are not required. They are often included, though. The requirements are more on the safety side. Yes. They're required. The safety elements that are required in lab testing are mostly the pesticides, heavy metals, any foreign matter that may have made its way in during processing. The terpenes, I would like to see that be required. That, personally, that's the dream. That's how I make my purchasing decisions. But currently it's more if the information is available, and then obviously smell. Yeah, your best.
I'm sure we're heading in that direction, but it'll probably be a while until it's a requirement.
Yeah, I feel like we caught wind of the terpene conversation years ago, and we're just barely now seeing that is becoming more and more common knowledge in the industry and among consumers.
Cool. Okay, another question which is very much related. What are the best ways to educate customers to focus on terpene profiles rather than just pure THC potency advertised labels? That's a question from Sebastian.
I have found that the description of essential oils and the focusing on talking about smells and how they make you feel, for me, has been the most successful. I will be honest, I think both of our organizations have created content that's very in-depth and educational and explains all of these things. What I'm finding overall is people need a simpler explanation. And that has primarily been how I educate people is, I like to use lavender essential oils before I go to bed because the smell makes me feel relaxed. Obviously, again, there isn't clinical evidence of essential oils doing these things either. It's very, very anecdotal, but it is a good comparison to say if you really like this smell, then you're probably going to like these terpenes. And the smell thing really does resonate with people because everybody can understand, oh, I love X food. Well, X food has terpenes in it. Every plant does. I think even humans have terpenes. Don't quote me on that one, but I believe that it is true.
We'll edit that out.
So, plants definitely. And so the smells associated with food, the smells associated with candles, essential oils, people really understand the concept of scent and how scent changes the experience of consumption. And so that's really where I go. I would like to solve the puzzle, frankly. I think when we find the answer that gets people to really, really understand the terpene conversations, we're all going to be big winners.
Yeah, definitely. Well, that is what we're trying to do at the Kenigma, solve the cannabis enigma, exactly. I think we've got a long way to do it. Leslie, I think we're going to wrap up now. Thank you so much for joining us. It was really interesting. And thank you everyone for tuning in to this feed. As we've kind of mentioned throughout the broadcast, research is essential here, and educating yourselves is going to make that, your journey into finding products that you like all the more enjoyable, first of all, and also smoother. So definitely check out the Kenigma, check out Weedmaps to do your research before your first visit to a dispensary, after your first visit to a dispensary, and, along the way.
All the time.
All the time. So yeah, thanks again for joining us. And thanks everyone. And
thank you so much
enjoy
for
your
having
days.
me.
Yeah. And good luck for your first trip to the dispensary. Not you.
Yes.
Obviously.
Well, I mean,
I think that ship has sailed. All right. Bye, guys.
Thank you, everybody.